Yeah, Thomas, I think there's a few things, and in no particular order, but a city needs to be, firstly, be able to attract talent, and particularly young talent, not just from itself, and not just to have talent living there, but attract talent from around the world. In Cape Town's case, clearly we've got 4 fantastic universities. That puts us on the front foot immediately. But for me, it's not just in the university space, it's also in the business space, in the government space. We want to be able to, people around the world need to think, gosh, I've got young, I'm talented, where do I want to be? And they need to think Cape Town. So attract talent is key. That speaks to the second thing, and that's to be globally oriented. To say, look, we're in Cape Town, we're an African city, but actually we operate across the continent, we operate globally, etc. So it's be globally oriented. So talent, globally oriented, and then critically be globally connected. So be able to fly directly into London or directly into the US. Being able to connect virtually as well through broadband. You know, Skype is the big one, of course, but for business, being able to connect directly as well. And broadband plays a critical role. So talent, being able to be globally oriented and globally connected.
The globally connected aspect and globally orientated, looking not just at Cape Town and the Western Cape region, but South Africa within our Southern African region and Africa as a whole. It seems that inter-Africa trade has been stifled, but it has been picking up over the past few years. What are your opinions looking at inter-Africa trade?
I think there's a number of things. You know, some people might say that African trade Africa's been operating as separate countries. And of course, the first realization is that despite what people in the US and other parts of the world might say, Africa isn't one country. You know, so we do have discrete countries. But from my experience, having worked in various parts of the continent, West Africa, East Africa, and working a lot with professional services firms and retailers, what one sees is that the retailers typically go in, or the people like ShopRite Checkers in Cape Town's case, Sanlam Properties, they go in, they see an opportunity. I know Sanlam has just bought a big property in Lagos, and then you find your professional services businesses coming in behind that to support it. You know, it's absolutely critical when you're going into a new country to understand the culture of that country, understand the business practices, and having an advisor on the ground. So what I'm seeing more and more is businesses, in fact based out of Cape Town, operating across the continent, professional services, retailers, a range of different organizations. Vatsilo is one of our members, based here and operating wholly owned subsidiaries across the continent. So it has been stifled, I accept that, but I think what you'll see in the next 5 to 10 years is that Africa is going to step up its trade significantly.
Let's turn now to the 4 key megatrends that are affecting economies across the world and how these impact on Africa, more specifically Western Cape and the Cape Town region.
You know, I think I've said this to you earlier, I'm a futurist, so understanding what the future might hold and how it impacts us today is very important. And that also then provides us with the opportunity to say, right, if this is how it's going to impact us, what do we do to take maximum advantage of it? The National Development Plan speaks about the rise of the African middle class, or the burgeoning African middle class. It speaks about technological change, climate change, of course the big ones of globalization and urbanization. Now, those have significant impact. I think where you have challenge, you have opportunity, of course, and that's fair enough. But if we just pick on one, perhaps we should pick on the emerging African middle class. What that means, and one's seen it around the world where middle classes have picked up. We obviously want that, but it does put pressure on food security, water security, energy security. And I think that's something that provides us with opportunity. In the Western Cape, we've got a good agricultural sector. We've got great, I've mentioned great universities. Let's look at innovation, entrepreneurship, and tie it into agriculture. Take those universities, look at what they can do here, look at what agricultural technology can do, how do we innovate around that. In the African continent, the use of technology in agriculture is quite limited. It provides a great opportunity in the Western Cape for the food security, as an example. I've mentioned energy security. I think we've got a great opportunity in the Western Cape. Our Saldanha and Cape Town harbours are very close to relatively very close to the West African oil and gas fields. Let's use that opportunity to meet our energy security needs. We can service them from here. Saldanha as an oil and gas servicing hub is fantastic. We've got issues around labour here. Let's use the labour that we've got to service those needs. So I think there's great opportunity in the Western Cape.
You touched on the role of technology, and I want us to dive a bit deeper. There's been a large push behind rollout of broadband and improving the level of connectivity within the Western Cape region. For you, what is the key focus when looking at how ICT can grow the Western Cape economy? What is the crux of the matter there?
Yeah, Thomas, my numbers might be a little bit out of date. I wrote my thesis on the future of Cape Town specifically and how to use ICT to unlock economic opportunity. One needs to look at it from two angles, financial and economic. Now the financial multipliers are something like 10.6, so for every rand invested you're getting more than 10 rand back over a 20 to 30 year horizon. The economic multipliers are similar. There's no question, having spoken to a number of economists who've investigated this particular aspect and looked at it globally, there's no question that investing in broadband lowers the cost of business. There's a number of knock-on effects, including in things like healthcare, including in things like education. So for me, there's no question. The only point I'd make is, as much as the province is doing it, and I think they're doing a good job, so let's be clear about that, I think it needs to be expedited. And I think business is itching to get involved and get engaged, to say, how can we help you? And I've been approached by a number of organizations saying, we are ready, let's make this go quicker.
What for you is the role of corporate, or the corporate responsibility in going forward in South Africa?
I think it's an interesting one. I think the first thing is that we all, and I think we need to absolutely emphasize this. I happen to be a keen follower of rugby. Now I know some people don't like sports analogies, and I apologize for anyone that doesn't, but we're all on the same team here. We're all on Team South Africa, regardless of whether we're government, business, civil society, academia. We all need to pull together. I think business has a key role to play. If I think about, coming back to your question about education, Samsung have recently invested in 15 schools across the African continent. Where some people in the world look at Africa and they say, big problems, Samsung clearly are looking at it and saying, wow, great opportunity here. We'll take on 15 schools and we'll train them, and we'll train them in the skills that we want to see in 10 to 15 years' time. Effectively, what they're doing is educating careers, future workforce out of Africa. One of our members is a large financial services business. They absolutely need underwriters. They have a vested interest in making sure that in 10 years' time they have good underwriters, that the economy works, that the municipalities work. There's a role for business and government to partner there, to say, right, we know we want this country to fly. What do we need 10, 15 years down the track? How do we partner with government and with other role players to make that happen?
Chris, finally, going forward, what for you must be the key focal points, or which sectors of our economy, not just here in the Western Cape, are going forward? I know there is no silver bullet to any of our problems, but what for you are the key focal points?
I think, Thomas, I'm going to take you back to what I started off by saying about the megatrends and the need for energy security, food security, water security. For me, those are things which can turn the economy. In the short term, we absolutely need to absorb labor. No one disputes that. I think, again, if I pick on the oil and gas sector, there's an opportunity there in the Western Cape to use artisanal skills to drive the absorption of labor at the same time, as I say, as looking at energy security. So oil and gas would be a key one. There's no question at all that the Western Cape is very, very well positioned, in Africa specifically, in financial services and within that asset management. I've mentioned agricultural processing, agricultural technology, ICT, interactive digital media. We'd be silly in the Western Cape, given how beautiful it is, to ignore tourism. We are the fastest growing business process outsource center in the country. So even if one looked at those, we are absolutely well positioned on this continent to drive those sectors and to really move the country and the economy forward. I think it's a great place to start.